These are just some of the sounds that would be heard daily throughout the war. There's nothing quite like this. This is what Francis Peggy-Magabo would have gone through and experienced every day for his 3.5 years he spent fighting for Canada during the Great War. This podcast will be focusing on the story of an Aboriginal war hero and equal rights activist, Francis Peggy-Magabo. Both of his parents passed away before he could remember them, so he grew up with an adoptive family as a member of the Parry Island Band in Parry Sound, Ontario. In his early life, he'd worked on the Great Lakes on small freighters. During his time as a sailor, he was given a small leather pouch from one of his co-workers that was meant to keep him safe from great danger. Francis believed the pouch offered him special protection and helped him perform unimaginably dangerous tasks throughout the war. As soon as the war began, in 1914, Francis enlisted. Keep in mind that Aboriginals were not heavily recruited early in the war, and most were actually turned away, along with the other minorities. Ignoring these discriminatory bans against immigrants and First Nations, by August 20th, 1914, Francis was judged fit for overseas combat and was sent off to Valcartier, Quebec, to attend the training camp for Canadian soldiers bound for Europe. February for 1915, the Canadian Expeditionary Forces, Francis included, were learning about trench warfare in Ypres salient, and just 2 months later, he was enduring the Germans' first gas attack on the Western Front. In any war, there are soldiers who just follow orders and only do what they are required to. Then there are other soldiers who take extreme personal risks and engage the enemy. Almost immediately after the battle started in England, Francis, known as Peggy by his fellow soldiers, was marked as one of these extreme soldiers. His biggest impact were his skills as a sniper, taking missions into no man's land that no other soldier wanted, waiting for any German to show up so he could take his shot. It almost seemed as if Peggy would seek out danger. Usually working alone made his jobs much more dangerous. Sometimes he would decide to find a way into German trenches and stand alongside the enemy soldiers without them knowing. He would take souvenirs by cutting pieces of clothing off the German troops' clothing as they slept. Soldiers from both sides were falling left and right, going down in huge numbers, but Francis stayed healthy throughout 1915 and most of 1916. In August 1915, he was promoted to Lance Corporal. At the time, Aboriginals weren't even technically Canadian citizens, so this was a big deal for those who knew him back home. Across seas, however, it was no surprise to the soldiers. Due to the fact that everyone was equal, all fighting the same fight, being rated by your peers solely based on your courage and performance on the battlefield, Peggy-Magabo clearly showed his strengths in these categories. Thanks to this, he was a part of the first group of 78 soldiers who were awarded the military medal. Fast forward a few months to September 1916. Peggy faced a leg wound that would have sent him home, but he pursued a letter campaign to go back to battle by May 1917. His skills next came into play at Passchendaele, where he received another military medal for contact maintenance with units on the flanks and guiding lost relief units. After being stricken down by pneumonia, he returned for the Battle of Arras, where he earned the second bar on his military medal. By November 1917, he'd been shipped back to England, suffering from disciplinary problems, unlike the ones where he'd fight on his own, and a case of exhaustion psychosis. Once the Great War had finally come to an end, Peggy returned to Canada. Ideas of home and wondering if it had changed due to the war ran through his head. But the home he came back to was exactly the same as how he'd left. He was still in extreme poverty, even though he, to this day, is one of the greatest Canadian war heroes, despite the fact he was not even considered a Canadian citizen. In 1952, Francis passed away from a heart attack at the age of 64, after years of suffering from badly damaged lungs. He died as the most decorated Aboriginal soldier in Canadian history. One of the 37 men to have second band on his military medal, so I think we can disregard the Aboriginal part and call him one of the most decorated soldiers in Canadian history. His family still tells stories of his war efforts, his 378 sniper kills, more than anyone else from any country during the war, and the amount of courage that he had in order to follow through on all of his dangerous assignments. To his family and people, he is not only remembered as a Canadian soldier, but as an icon against the race bans and those who were pushed away from doing something great just because of how they looked. He pushed the limits of race all the way overseas, where he proved to everyone minorities are just as important as anybody else. Pegamagabo was a start to the Aboriginal rights movement, but he also symbolizes everything wrong with discrimination. From this next quote from Francis's son, Duncan Pegamagabo, you wouldn't be able to tell the race of the soldier, only that he took massive risks for his country and got things done. My mother told me he used to go behind enemy lines, rub shoulders with the enemy forces, and never got caught. He was always saying how we have to live in harmony with all living things in this world. Francis Pegamagabo left a huge impact on all of the Canadian Aboriginals today, getting the rights movement started and showing them that they can do everything anyone else can. I had never heard anything about this war hero before, and hearing and reading about his story has really helped me, and I hope you too, to view history a little differently. How everyone had a part in the war, how every soldier and troop was treated the same, no matter how discriminated against they were by most of society. Fighting for your country is one of the most patriotic and honorable things you can do. Francis Pegamagabo took that to another level by not only proving that Aboriginals and minorities could do it as well, but do it successfully. Francis is one of the most decorated Canadian soldiers, someone who sacrificed himself for others at every chance he could, a true Canadian hero, completely forgotten by our generation.